Hi, welcome to the Channel 2.0 podcast. My name is Cameron Olson. We are really excited today to talk about all things channel, everything from 2 a.m. Trust to Channel 2.0. Today we have a very special guest, Dustin McLain. Dustin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. My name is Dustin McLain. I've got 14 years experience in recruiting for telecom and technology. Focus Search Consultants was a family firm that we ran, and then talents recruiting as well. So very well versed in all things recruiting for the bulk of my career. I am currently the channel manager for Titan Cloud Storage. We are a cloud storage and infrastructure as a service company, and it is a startup. So I'm excited about that pathway in my career.
Yeah. So what brought me to wanting you on the show is the number of people that I am seeing on the sideline wanting to get back in, looking for a job, looking for a position. It seemed like 2024 was kind of a tough year for the channel. Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of layoffs, a lot of organizations reducing their sales staff, specifically on the channel side. So as we get into 2025, it feels like it's starting to open up, and there becomes kind of a new need to find good people and get them into the right spot. You mentioned you kind of had a family-owned recruiting company. Talk to me what that was like. Growing up, you probably ran around the office or you saw your parents working. What was it like to be a son of recruiters?
Yeah, so it was my mother and father were both in the business. My dad was always in telecom, really, as far as he could go back. He was the director of staffing for BTI, which became Deltacom, which became Windstream. And so in the 90s, they broke off and started Focus Search. And so again, growing up, that was more part of my DNA. And so was telecom, right? A lot of my internships and things like that in college were, very much on the telecom and recruitment side. So I got a lot of exposure there. But obviously, working with family has its, challenges, but obviously it's a lot of benefit to it. And, I was fortunate to be able to, it grow my network very quickly within the industry, kind of having that familial connection. And then, I would say towards the back end of those 3 or 4 years, had a large, was essentially kind of managing, the day-to-day operations for that business.
Channel family, I'm excited to interrupt you for just a brief moment to let you know about an amazing new tool we created just for the channel. Our job board is designed to bring job seekers and employers together to help the channel grow by bringing the right talent to the right opportunity. If you are a job seeker, it's free to join, post your resume, and find employers who already have postings and value your channel experience. If you are hiring, you will find candidates who already are immersed in the channel ecosystem right at your fingertips. So go to jobs.thechanneladvisors.com and check it out and find your job today. This is more than a job board. It's a community tool to help our industry thrive. So join today. Now back to the podcast. So I'm always jealous of people that had a longer history of getting into the telco space. I remember when I got my first job at an interconnect, having to learn terminology like a PRI and frame relay and all that stuff. And I'm getting on Wikipedia and clicking all the buttons and learning all the stuff. Do you feel like you had a better, and I won't say better, do you feel like you had an unfair shot at coming into this space, hearing this terminology your entire life?
I think so. And when I got into it, what was nice was having, kind of it's funny, I have some mentors, and a lot of them are in the channel now. And in the early days, I could pick up the phone and call them, and have them kind of lay out products and services so I could do my job a little bit easier. And having kind of that conduit to success, and feeling like, someone wasn't going to. And again, a lot of that kind of comes back from the family, right? Being a young guy, getting into the business, having people around you that, could be mentors in that sense. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it certainly was a bit of a cheat code, coming into it that way.
So how long have you been doing recruiting services in the telco channel?
So in the channel, I would say, probably 10 years, and specifically, we were very channel focused. I would say going back the last 5 or 6, that's been where a lot of the companies have kind of shifted their efforts. And frankly, like from a recruiting standpoint, it was, you know, always one of the largest initiatives, and you needed your time to hire to be relatively quick. As you've got one channel manager a region, you can't have that seat vacant for very long, right? So as opposed to a direct sales position, if you've got an opening in a market, that position can sit there a little bit longer before there's a little more heat internally to fill that spot. And so I think that's kind of what led us to really focus on the channel. And we did, I think part of it as well is we were working with some of the TSDs at the time. So we did work with TBI, and we worked with Intelisys a little bit, and a few others kind of scattered in, Microcorp going way back. So there's been some familiarity of that, and there was some advisement with companies that were looking to jump into the channel. So that's kind of been, where we focused on it.
So if you've been doing this for 10 years, my guess is at the beginning, they would come to you and they would say, hey, we're looking for somebody with channel experience. And that finding somebody with channel experience 10 years ago was probably not easy, because there's not a lot
It's
of people with channel experience, period.
it
Right?
was so much different.
How did you find people with channel experience?
Oh, I think back then, I mean, the landscape's changed a lot. Like to your point, right? That part of my career, even LinkedIn was very different, right? So that was a lot of, word of mouth, your personal network, having, calling someone and having them send you 3 or 4 names, and then you just run those 3 or 4 names down, right? And it kind of goes down the line. Um, and it was just a much smaller channel, much more concentrated. So, now as the channel has really exploded over the last 5 or 6 years, obviously that looks a lot different, right? The channels are much larger, and even some of our clients, or going back to focus, some of the clients that we had for many years, their channels were larger than their sales teams, when you know versus when we started, if that makes sense.
So talk through what your experience has been working with clients. So you have telco and SaaS suppliers asking you to find channel resources. Talk to us about kind of what you found from that, working with them about what they're looking for. Are all companies who have a channel built the same? Are the cultures the same? Are there what they're looking for the same? Are they looking, is everybody looking for the same type employee, or do you feel like there's a lot of different things out there that they're looking for because companies are different?
That's it. That you nailed it, right? Everybody's a little bit different, and everybody has a different budget, right? Which can impact the channel mightily. Um, and I think the biggest thing is companies, generally start to understand that just because someone has been successful in the channel, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be successful going somewhere else, right? And so when you're evaluating a candidate, as a company, for the channel, you have to really take a deeper dive into what's made that candidate successful. Does their book of business or book of partners really line up with what their offering is? A perfect example, and it doesn't mean that someone can't be successful making a move, but it's certainly something that you have to, dig a little bit deeper into, that person's network, and again, like what's made them successful, right? Like it's really, I think when you look at success in the channel with, say, your top 20 or 30%, in terms of, someone that's President's Club or hitting quota. I think it's more of a mindset in a sense, kind of combined with their network. But there's a drive there that you're going to get. We're talking the candidates that are actively pursued, right?
So, Dustin, you said that successful channel managers all kind of have a mindset, or you see a mindset. Can you put your finger on what that mindset is? How do they think? What is it that makes them successful?
So I think that it's different for every person, right? We all have motivators, but I think motivation, you know, there's a drive. And again, like to your point, it's sometimes hard to kind of put your finger on, but I think that um, there is there is another level of productivity that comes out of some of the top channel managers that we see across the country throughout telecom and technology. Um, and again, it stems from that network, but it's a willingness to out channel other channel managers.
I've always heard people say that the best salesperson, or what you look for in a salesperson, is somebody with a lot of debt and a lot of responsibility. If you have a nice car, if you have nice things, you have a family, those are the people that make good salespeople. Do you think that's true?
I do. I think there is truth to that, right? Like I think people are. It's a big motivator, to be an earner and to live the lifestyle that you want to live, and it makes you want to go out every day and be better than your competition, right? And put a little bit more effort into it and respond to those emails a little bit faster, get those quotes out a little faster, things like that. I think that it translates to success when you feel like you have to hit that number every month and exceed it.
I see a lot of channel managers with resumes where they jump every year to year and a half, maybe 2 years at most. Seems to be a fairly common resume within the industry with all of the mergers and acquisitions and changes, or suppliers coming in and out of the channel, leaning in at times and then pulling out at the other. How do employers look at resumes that look like that? Is that a negative thing? Is it a positive thing? Could it be both?
Great question. So it certainly can be a bit of both, right? I think that there is always going to be a story, and having a recruiter can help you unwind that story a bit more and get a little bit more context. And also, we typically would do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to fact checking, right, within our network, and understanding, hey, this person had 3 moves in 4 years, but these are their stack rankings. These are the numbers they were putting up. These are the partners that love doing business with them, but it was more organizational changes. And I think that's something that does come up quite a bit. And it is a very common talk track, right? Where you have to say, hey, I know this person has made some moves, but they're a great candidate. Or it can be the opposite, right? Where someone has had a really hard time adjusting to a new culture, a new product set, whatever the case may be. And so then you do see that, right? Like there's ramping in the channel is tough. And, that's always the challenge for whether it be a channel director or a channel chief. It's like you want people to get in, you want them to get going quickly and have that ramp up time, as minimal as possible. And so obviously when you see someone that has moves, there is a question mark there where it's like, how quickly is this person going to be able to ramp? And is that a part of maybe why they left previous organizations? So again, every candidate's different, and there is a lot of change in the industry, right? Throughout acquisitions and just really everything. So I think that, just having a better understanding of individual cases, and as a recruiter, being able to shed light on a background with more context can help an employer make that decision.
Yeah, what I find is, you get it takes so much time to be successful in the channel, especially starting from scratch, right?
Right.
It takes several months to find a partner. It takes several months to get that partner on board. It takes them a few months to find an opportunity. It takes a couple months for that opportunity to close. You're 8 or 9 months before you start seeing revenue. And a lot of the suppliers out there don't have the CRM set up to see some of the leading indicators to see if there's success happening from the beginning, or they just wait that 8 or 9 months to see if revenue is going to come. And now 8 or 9 months is here and there's not seeing anything. I think both suppliers and the employees could probably do a better job of finding those leading indicators on what finding success looks like before we get to that 8 or 9 months and decide to make it or break it at that point. You, one of the things I find is salespeople are really good at selling, and that even includes selling themselves. Right? They're a great at talking about all the benefits. What have you seen from people that are hiring in order to kind of look through some of that, and instead of being caught up with all the salesmanship that happens in an interview? What do people typically do to really kind of drive into the brass tacks of hiring that employee?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think it's a combination of things. Specifically to the channel, it could be a body of work over the course of their career. Is kind of a good baseline, right? That gives you an idea of the successes that they've had, maybe some of their partner network, right? So essentially, it's giving you a glimpse. Beyond their salesmanship, right? Because obviously we're all salespeople, and channel managers are great salespeople. So, they're selling themselves on an opportunity, and you have to kind of pull a lot of that back kind of in layers and understand, is this person going to be successful within this organization? Are they a fit for this culture? Have they sold this product set? Do their partners kind of line up with what we're trying to target? Because again, with the channel, it's each organization is going to be a bit different, but I think you are always going to want to target the right types of partners for your product set or for your solutions. And so finding someone that has a network within, kind of the perfect partner is going to be the best fit.
Look, man, that is just an amazing point, because what I find is super important as I consult with suppliers is identifying the right IPP, the ideal partner profile.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't know what that is. They just say, "Hey, we want partners," but not all partners, trusted advisors, call them whatever you will, are built the same. Some of them go after certain verticals. Some of them play in the SMB space. Some of them are only well hunters. So yeah, trying to understand what that partner profile is, and does the channel manager you're trying to hire have those type of connections? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's critical. It's critical, and it's often overlooked, right? I think that you can, again, kind of going back to your point a minute ago, if you have someone that's aggressively pursuing an opportunity, they're selling themselves on why they're a great fit. They're showing you the success that they've had, the deals that they've closed. And in a lot of cases, that's very applicable, but you have to take a deeper dive into some of those and go, where are these deals coming from? Something that I urge channel managers that I work with to do, just from a transparency perspective, is share the partners, maybe the top 10, 20, or 30 that they work with, right? And that used to be a no-no. Going back years and years, partners were very, you were kind of keeping that secretive in terms of who you were working with until you landed somewhere. But you have the relationship. If someone knows who you work with, it doesn't mean that that person is going to just automatically have the relationship because they have the name. But where it helps channel manager and company is if you're upfront with who you're doing business with and who you have really good relationships with, it's going to give them a very clear indicator early in the process if you're going to be a good fit for them. But it's also going to, from a channel perspective, like the channel manager, it's going to let them know, oh, they're already doing business with some of these partners. So I won't necessarily get to work with that partner when I come in there. Or it's going to show you that, as the prospective candidate, that, hey, maybe this isn't going to be a great fit because they're coming back to you saying, hey, we don't think these partners are going to be, kind of in the perfect profile, right? So I think it's just transparency and, you know, understanding kind of what that profile is for both parties. And sometimes the companies don't know, right? Like sometimes an organization will say, to your point, we just want someone to get out there and evangelize and get in front of every partner that they can. And as we all know, that's not always the winning strategy.
Every supplier out there wants a rock star, right? They want to go out and hire the best person for the role. Why is it that sometimes that's not the best case scenario?
It's a great question. So, and this is something that comes up with every position that I would work within the channel. Um, you want a rock star, but there are a lot of intricacies to getting a rock star, right? And things have to kind of line up perfectly. How is the timing for that person that you're pulling? What are their expectations? I think channel managers that are rock stars generally have a full pipeline. They have their lifestyle in cruise control, right? It doesn't mean they don't work hard. It just means that their days are regimented, everything's set. Um, they're not in the, you know, they're not in the ramp period, right? So there's an adjustment for them to look at another job and to start over, right? And sometimes that's something that um, they will, more or less put a number to it and say, for me to make a move to another organization, I'm going to have to make exponentially more, right? Whether it be in total comp or base salary or whatever. And so I think that you see companies kind of chase certain candidates, right? And they want to pay a little bit more. They want to try to get them to come over. But again, they're not, the bigger picture is that that person is going to go from being the top dog to being the first, to essentially being back into a new role, right? Where they're going to have to rebuild it all over again. And a lot of them can make that transition very fast. But some of them have not been in that spot for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, right? So it's new to them, or something they haven't done in a long time. How do they handle that transition? How does, if I pull someone from a company that's where they're selling circuits, right? But they're going to a UC company. Okay, how does that change, from a partner perspective? Their partners have been calling them for 5 or 10 years about circuits, but now they have to change that branding within their network for a different product set. But that partner may already have 2 or 3 people that they also really like and work with a lot that sell that product set. So it can complicate things where, again, if you're pulling someone network and then putting into another network type role, or UC to another UC, it's a little bit easier. But when you have like big swings across product sets, sometimes that can even be more challenging, right? And that's where you have to do a lot more due diligence as an organization. But you also, the candidate has to really understand what they're getting into. They have to understand that they're likely going to take a bit of a step back, to take a couple steps forward. And so it can be challenging to make that adjustment. I typically go after candidates that are, have maybe were the rock star in their previous role, but then took a job that they didn't really, that they thought was going to be something else, and it didn't turn out that way. And so now they're considering a move again. So you're getting someone that's still a rock star, but maybe they made a move that they shouldn't have made. You can timing. It's easier to find timing, line up a bit if you get someone that is moving for those types of reasons, as opposed to just pursuing someone that is, you know, kind of cemented in their role, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love the transition. We go from talking about how suppliers look at trying to find employees, and I think the conversation around that question is much more around the employee or job seeker making sure that they go in and ask the right questions about the employer. if you're searching for a new role and you are becoming a channel manager, what are the questions you should be asking your potential employer to make sure that that's a right fit for you?
So I think that's a great question. I think it's a few things, right? It's understanding the success that they've had on the channel to date. You know, what are the challenges? You know, if I'm coming into a role, you know, I live in Orlando. If I'm coming into a role in Orlando, you know, what's the success been like in the Southeast? You know, what am I coming into? You know, I want to know upfront. You know, is this a market that has to be built out? You know, how many partners do you have that are active in this market, right? You know, what were some of the key wins you had last year in this market? Who were those partners? Just understanding kind of at a baseline, you know, the success that the previous person have or didn't have, and what's going to be needed. You know, things like, did you know, do I have to do any, you know, kind of brand rebuilding in this market, right? Did we
Is it
have
an
an
apology
install?
tour?
Yeah, is it an apology tour? Like, did we have an install go sideways and, you know, now nobody wants to work with us for a couple months, right? Like, you have to understand that. And that's something that, you know, working with a lot of different providers, you know, I've seen frequently where you'll have someone will leave or retire, and it's the easiest job to fill because they go, you know, candidates go, oh my God, I want that job. They have a great name. All the partners are already working with them. I'm coming into something that's programmed, right? But more often than not, it's not that, right? There's a little bit more to it, and so that's something that, you know, if I'm recruiting, I'm educating and being upfront with my candidates to ensure that they know, hey, this is what you're getting into. But if they go into an interview process, they have to kind of take it one step further, right? And so I think, you know, that's kind of the number one thing. Compensation, but obviously that's going to come later if you have identified that it's a fit, that it's something that you want to take on. You know, I think that it really just comes down to, give me as much information as I can about your company, about your organization, about your channel, and the successes that you've had. And, you know, if it makes sense, you know, then we keep going.
Yeah, one thing the channel's got going for it that I don't know you find in a lot of industries is we're a chatty group, right? We stories spread, which could be good and bad, right? If you're finding
Good.
lots of success, people know it. If you're struggling, people know it on both sides, both as an employee and an employer. I've seen a lot of scenarios where an employer makes decisions to kind of back out of the channel, but still need some channel help. And
Right.
it's really hard to find candidates to fill those positions to because that channel's kind of disappearing a little bit and nobody wants to go work for a dying channel that doesn't help promote their brand or promote their name, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big one, right? You have to feel like they're committed to it, and that you're going to have the resources that you need to be successful. You know, I think, you know, we see it come up a lot as budget, right? It's like, how much budget am I going to have? You know, what am I going to have access to be able to, you know, take partners, take partners out or have events, right? Like, it's the talk track's a little bit different now than what it was 5 or 6 years ago, but, you know, I think the general sense of it is still, how committed are you? How much budget is available? You know, for us to really maximize our efforts in this territory.
One of the biggest questions I get is people call me kind of looking to jump for a new role, and their always question is what do you think about this company or what do you think about this role? And what I find is there's a couple different categories that are kind of things you should think about. One of the categories I'd like to talk about is a company who has a very defined channel program, very regimented, it's been around a long time, versus a company that is just getting into the channel. Why would you take one of those over another? What would you think?
So that's a really good question. And I think that there's a couple there's a couple ways to answer it. So we'll start with why I would go for a company that has, say, a smaller channel, less defined. I think upside is the big thing, right? Generally, in that scenario, you're not going to be, kind of in a struggle with your peers to work with the partners that are in your network. You're generally going to have a larger territory where you can stretch out a little bit more. So if you've got great relationships across the TSDs and you go, hey, I'm not just working this region anymore, I can kind of start to branch out, and then they're going to feed you into their partner deck, right? So I think upside, having a territory that's probably a little bit larger. When you get into regimented channels, they're they're hyper efficient, but you have a smaller area to kind of work, and so
The one thing that I find a lot of is the ones that are coming into the channel. Look, every salesperson says they want some sort of management, right? They want to get out of being the direct hands, feet on the street. They want to get into management. Now, I think we really need to really ask ourselves the questions and get to know our personality. Like, do I really want to manage? Is that really my strength? Or, hey, am I a better an individual contributor? There's a whole podcast probably on that
oh yeah,
somewhere.
oh yeah,
But those that want to get into management, it always strikes me as odd is those are the people who are at an organization where there's a tenure of 10 years and they're like, I have no upward mobility, right? So it's really difficult to climb the ladder when you have a really strong channel program. People are making lots of money, they're hitting their quota,
yes.
right? Everybody has an ROI, everything's doing great. But you get over to some of these smaller companies and they're in the program, it's a lot less determined. One of the things I always ask the people is, how comfortable are you without a schedule? Are you self-sustainable? Do you need a regimented program? If you work from home, are you constantly finding yourself in the fridge or watching TV or in the backyard or playing with your kids? Like, you really have to know yourself to decide, am I better at building and creating and self-sustainable, or am I better with somebody really driving and giving me direction?
Oh, absolutely. I think you're right. Like you have to, it's soul searching, right? To figure out, is this really what I'm kind of built out for? And moving to an organization that has, is maybe just getting into the channel or has a less defined channel can be a really good option. You know, to your point, sometimes it's very hard to move up with organizations that have, fully established channels that are essentially built out where there's a lot of tenure. Think any cable company or some of the larger ISPs, right? A lot of their channels are just kind of in place, right? And a lot of the same names and the same figures have been there for a long time. And so you're looking at every year at the end of the year, you're kind of doing your review. You're like, what? I've been hitting my number. I'm doing everything that's asked of me. How can I make that change? And I think that's looking at another organization and reduplicating yourself within another organization is kind of how you get that start, right? So if you can find a company that's looking for someone with your skill set and help them, duplicate it, even if it's one by one, or taking kind of a step back in a sense to build something out on a smaller scale, it's going to put you in a much better position to kind of advance faster, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. So the other category that I find a lot in, especially now in our channel, over the last couple of years, we've introduced new technology, right? Cybersecurity, we've introduced cloud. It's no longer the network and long distance show. We're really expanding outside of that. Just recently, we now have AI coming into the space in a couple different forms. And everybody asks me when they're looking at an opportunity to a new technology, do I take that job? Is there stability in that? What's your answer typically to people who ask you those questions about that?
So it's unique because I kind of just did that, right? I jumped on with Titan last year, and for for me at least, it's an exciting sector. It's growing. The addressable market is set to explode over the next 4 or 5 years, and so I saw it as a chance to kind of jump in before things really caught on. Think AI 2 or 3 years ago, um, or not. AI and cybersecurity, I'll kind of put them in the same bucket. 2 or 3 years ago, they started to kind of catch on, and now it's more, they're much more visible in the channel, I guess you could say now. I think that it really just depends, right? It depends on the types of partners that you work with, your relationships, your motivation, because motivation is big, right? Like you have to be willing to jump in and know that I'm starting all the way over. I am going back to school for 6 months, essentially, to learn a new product, to understand kind of what my value proposition is, right, at a basic level. And so that's not for everybody, right? And I think when people start to kind of take a deeper dive into what's going to be required, then they'll either step into it or they'll go, you know what, I think I'm happy kind of doing what I've been doing, and that's fine, right? And I think partners are in the same spot. We talk to TSDs every day that say, hey, it's really hard for us to get partners to sell outside of the voice and data element. And I think as partners become more educated, and as things advance from that perspective, then it will be probably easier to make jumps for some of these channel managers that are looking to kind of get into some of the emerging technology companies. And I think another thing we're seeing more of now is more of those companies really wanting to get into the channel and coming into, say, the telecom pool of candidates, because it is hyper efficient. When you look at telecom and its relationship with the channel and the active partners and active sellers that they already have, it makes a lot of sense, right? To tap into that and to tap into the networks of some of these people, and from that perspective.
So let's create a little bit of a list. You said if somebody's looking at one of these new emerging techs or companies, they got to be able to understand technology, learn new technology, have a desire or a thirst for learning. Number two, be really good at educating and training partners on how to sell it, because nobody's selling yet. We got to figure out how to sell it.
Right.
Third, I think I would add into there, you have to be ready for mergers and acquisitions. When I sold telecom 12, 15 years ago, right, we got one person for the phones, one person for the dial tone, one person, like all of these different suppliers. And I saw a bunch of mergers and acquisitions in the UC space. I think we're doing that same thing in the cybersecurity space and the AI space, right? It's so disparate. It's all over the place. You're having to go here for EDR, here for MDR, here for this, here for that. And we're seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions for somebody to put something together. Not all people can handle mergers and acquisitions. That's a tough thing to go through, constant change. How have you seen people do best in merger and acquisition spaces?
So, you mean from a channel, like a channel manager, or
Yeah, channel managers being able to stay with a company and then get bought and get bought and get bought and be able to survive all of the buying.
I think there's a couple of points to that. I think if you're successful, then it's easier, right? Like if you're say if you're the President's Club channel manager, it's a little bit easier. You may be frustrated with the new changes within the organization, but in a lot of cases, it doesn't make sense to necessarily move. But yeah, surviving mergers and acquisitions can be very tough, and it can put a lot of strain on your individual contributors, because now they're dealing with multiple CRMs or new products that are integrating with the products that they've been selling, new platforms. I can think of a handful of providers, I'm sure you can too, where they've gone through many acquisitions and it's been a back end nightmare, right? So you may be selling it on the front end, but on the back end, there's a lot of issues because of those acquisitions and, service
Constantly fixing
delivery,
problems,
fixing
constantly.
problems, like
Yeah.
feeling like you've got to go back into every single deal and handhold and make sure that everything's taken care of. So there's a lot to take into consideration. And I think most of the time, or I say most of the time, but candidates that are coming to me generally have stuck it out for a period of time that they kind of set right when that happens, and they say, okay, I'm giving this 3 to 6 months to kind of see how things all kind of come together. And it just from my experience, it does. That's generally a big part of it, right? Is how are these companies going to be merged, on the back end and from a service or product delivery standpoint. Um, but also, is my territory shrinking? Is my quota going up? What are the variables that are going to, not only change kind of my day to day, but my compensation and, maybe my time with my family and things like that. Like if I've got to work 80 hours a week to kind of overcompensate for what's going on because of a merger and acquisition, then that kind of changes my interest in maybe remaining with that organization.
Yeah. Salespeople aren't very good at targets moving, right?
That's
Changing
the best way
comp
to put it.
plans, changing
Yeah,
territories, changing product set. Like that's one thing that kind of frustrates a lot of salespeople is constantly a changing target. When they're finally like, "Hey, I can calm down. I'm there." It's like, "Oh, your quota just doubled," and you're like, "Oh man," or "Hey, we just got acquired, and now your territory's cut in half," or
yeah,
whatever that is. It feels like that frustrates a lot of the salespeople. Do you see that same thing out there?
I do. Yeah, I do. And I think that, there's been some big acquisitions obviously in our industry over the last 10 years. And there are some years where we've had just kind of back to back to back. And I'm thinking, this is going back, but when it was Verizon acquired XO, you had Windstream and Earthlink, and there was a few others that year. And it was like the channel and the direct sales, it had such a ripple effect through everyone because you had layoffs, but then you had kind of hiring pushes, but there was all these different, like Windstream and Earthlink are a good example. Earthlink was really starting to get into SD-WAN prior to Windstream. And then when that took place, there was a lot of back end, kind of integration and just within the sales teams and things like that.
Everybody in this channel, it feels like it's a big game of musical chairs,
It
right?
is.
Somebody gets promoted and now there's a spot open and they pull this person and now there's a spot open and they pull this person. One of the biggest struggles I have that I think we need to work on in this industry is being able to bring in new talent that doesn't have channel experience,
Yes.
that can come in and be successful right away because there's a very clear line of how you go find success. That's one thing that this channel really struggles with.
Oh, absolutely. And to that point, I think we've started to see more organizations, channel integrate, and that's kind of the Kickstarter, right? For someone that's maybe direct sales but has the ability to work with partners and train partners. And I think that there's a lot of success in that. I think for many years, in the early days of the channel, it was, a little bit more reactive, maybe in terms of how you approached kind of orders coming in. And then, over the last 4 or 5, you providing value to partners in a different way, being more actively involved in opportunities, and helping them close deals and win business. And I think some companies, and I won't name them all, but there are several that I'm thinking of that have done a great job from a channel integration standpoint, where they've allowed direct sales reps to work with partners to help them close opportunities. And so partners will get into something, it's UC and they haven't sold a lot of UC. They'll bring a partner, or they'll essentially bring a rep in from one of these companies, and that's the rep that they work with to close business. and they don't have to get into the weeds. That rep can, and that rep is building out their channel profile, right? So, there's a lot of ways to attack it, but companies that are starting to kind of look outside and go after hungry salespeople that have a drive, and that that seems to be something that is key to success.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I've recognized is there's nobody out there that has a great channel training program, right? There's no companies that can hire outside people because they can't train them. I think one thing you brought to my attention that I didn't originally think of is channel integration is a little bit of that training, right?
Yeah.
It allows them to at least get their feet underneath them a little bit to understand how the partners work and how they want to work. But also at the same time, I've seen plenty of situations where suppliers build a channel integration dynamic, and it causes a lot of headache because direct people don't know how to integrate and work with channel people, and channel people are frustrated because the direct person takes their deal and they're talking with the client without actually having a
Yep.
conversation with them, and they think they own the account and the channel person thinks they own the account, and now it kind of just blows up in your face as well.
It can be an internal nightmare, right? Like if we're all being real, it can be an internal nightmare. I think it depends on, in that scenario, if, you know, the leaders within the organization, both on the direct side and the channel side, if you've got great leaders that, you know, see it as more of a team effort, that are cohesive, it's obviously going to be a lot better, and you're going to run into issues less. You'll still have those issues, but yeah, to your point, I mean, there's certainly some struggles that will take place, in that environment. But it is kind of a training wheels, for the channel, right? Like if you want to kind of increase channel presence and maybe add value in a different way to a partner, channel integration can be a great way to do that. You just know that you're going to likely be putting out some internal fires with
Yeah,
who's
have
getting
really, really clear lines of how things work. Have it really
it.
defined. That's yeah. My encouragement is spend some time doing that. If you need some help, that's what we come in and do is create the structure, create the processes, have the rule book, train your people on how
Yes.
that rule book works. So you just recently took a job and joined the channel management side. How has that changed your perspective? Does that make you a better recruiter? Does it change your perspective on everything?
I
Talk
would.
talk about that transition.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say, it would make me a better recruiter. I have a better understanding of all the things that I've been preaching as a recruiter. I'm living now in a different way, right? And so it's giving you a better understanding or a deeper understanding of what the role is, and what success really looks like, and how hard it is, to get to that, level, right? So it's certainly a deeper appreciation for that. But I mean, overall, it's been a great move. It was a very, it was unexpected in a lot of ways. When I've known Sean, who's our CRO, for about 10 years, have placed him a couple times. And we were just kind of going back and forth since he, had come on to Titan, and discussed the role kind of at length, and what their mission was. Again, we're a cloud storage company, at our core, but are really moving into the infrastructure as a service, cloud compute, virtual machines, more into that space. So, with the addressable market, and all the data kind of pointing to organizations really moving into the cloud over the next 5 years, it felt like, getting into something like this early was really exciting, and I just couldn't pass up that opportunity.
Yeah, so you saw the opportunity of getting into that new tech, new side, new
Yeah.
company, building a channel program, and decided to pull the trigger on it yourself. Then,
Absolutely, yeah, and I think I've been fortunate in some ways because, I do have a good network on the partner side and throughout the channel, right? So it was a bit of a different transition, even though I'm having to, learn the job in different ways because this is my first channel role. So there was, the learning curve was not as bad as it maybe would have been, if that makes sense, because I'm leaning on my network more than I would have.
Yeah, it sounds like you've always had a little bit of a precursor of education and training before you've had to go do anything in the channel. All right, what advice, what kind of parting words, what advice would you give to channel managers going through the new job, going through the hiring process? Like, what's your top advice to them?
So I think, sit down with your wife or your husband or your significant other, and as a family, and I always tell people to make these decisions as kind of a family. And if it's just you, that's great too, right? But as a family, you kind of have to identify what's important to you. What are your goals? What are you looking for? How much money do you need to make? And you kind of start from there, right? Because I think that sometimes we as salespeople can kind of see that flash in the pan, but our significant other or, you know,
They're
someone
just
else in
along
our
for the
life
ride.
or a mentor, right? It doesn't even have to be, it could be a mentor can say, press pause for a second, right? And really step back and evaluate this from a different perspective. And I think that's so critical before you go into looking at opportunities, or let's say you've been let go and you have to look at opportunities. You really have to do the same thing because if you don't, then you can kind of be blinded by the need for a job that you can take a job that may not be a great fit for you and may put you back in that spot in a year or less, right? So I think it starts with just evaluating kind of what your goals are and what you really need for you and your family, and then what's important to you. Is it better to have more structure and have more name brand recognition at a company that you go to, or do you value upside? Do you value career progression? Right? I think we talked about this earlier, but when you have programs that are very established and very built out, sometimes it can be hard to move up, right? So you look at opportunities with companies that are maybe less structured or just growing rapidly. There's a lot more growing pains in those types of roles, but there's obviously more upside maybe from an advancement standpoint. So understanding kind of where you fit within all that and identifying what's going to be the best fit for not only your skill set but your network. That's a good starting point, right? Before you jump into it.
Now let's do advice on the other side. You've worked with a lot of your clients as suppliers who are looking to fill roles. What's your advice to them?
I think bringing on someone that has the expertise and that has the network to help you build out your program to get the right people. Getting the right people is critical, right? And time to hire, right? You can't have positions within your organization that are vacant for a long period of time, right? So the goal is to get somebody in quickly, get them ramped up, but also have a structure in place and kind of a roadmap of what you want your channel to look like. But also, why are you looking to fill these positions? Is it growth oriented, or is it you have to kind of gut and rebuild, right? In a sense where maybe there's been some failures and you have to go in and identify what went wrong and how do we correct that. So again, I think bringing on uh, talent that can help you, identify kind of where the holes are, in your channel and how to improve and how to, streamline success, is critical.
Yeah. It's interesting to me on how many people are looking for people right now, right?
Yeah.
So many people are looking for good talent. There's a bunch of people out there that are looking for good jobs. They maybe have a role. shoot, even on my job board, one of the things you could do is you can toggle a button to say, hey, I'm publicly looking, people can search and find me, or hey, I'm not publicly looking, and the channel advisors employees can see those people. There's lots of those people who are working a job not necessarily satisfied but looking for their next role and next position. I think Cody Sanchez on a podcast said it best of, hey, if you don't have an upward mobility game plan for your employees and a way for them to make more money in advance, they're going to find it somewhere else.
Oh, absolutely. And I think to that point, that's one of the that's one of the benefits to having someone help you build out your organization, right? Because they're going to, to your point on your job board, you've got a toggle where people can go, hey, I'm looking, but I want the world to know that I'm looking. And, a lot of the best candidates are going to come out of that where it's very passive. It's not like, hey, I'm out there aggressively. Like, I don't want my entire network knowing that I'm aggressively looking for a role, but I'm looking for something different. And this is what I'm looking for, right? Everybody's story is going to be different. Their wants and needs, that's all different, right? But there's a perfect organization out there for that person. And, I think having kind of a conduit is important. And, but to your point, I mean, there's a vast number of people that are kind of silently looking for, advancement and, that upward mobility, or it really could be anything. It could be compensation or advancement, or, just how, kind of respect in an environment. I think sometimes you've got culture drives someone leaving or coming to an organization, right? So there's just so many things that candidates value. Everybody's going to value things differently, right? But just identifying that.